about yesterday, I'm assuming.
Yeah, we can lead into with that one then.
Yeah, we'll start with that one. Yeah. In fact, actually, I did some AI research on that as well, which is also quite disturbing. Yeah. Okay. So morning, Rick. Morning, Mike. Welcome. So, Rick, it's your intent to actually get the first comment in every morning before Mike nowadays, is it? We'll see how long that lasts, Ricky. Ricky. Okay. All right. So, um, okay. So Gary pointed this out yesterday, and we followed it up today. This is an older article, but still, Niagara County school cluster Niagara County School had a cancer cluster. And what they were looking at is this is the former Balmer Road site in Niagara County, and
It's in Niagara Falls in the U.S. on the U.S.
in
side
the
of the border.
US. Yeah. Niagara County, USA. Yeah, exactly. And it refers to a model city hazardous waste facility that was operated by CWM Chemicals. Whilst this isn't technically the Love Canal itself, it does have historical sites to that site that we commonly refer to as Love Canal. Because what happened is in the 40s and 50s, when they shut down Occidental Chemicals, they actually buried more than 21 tons of chemical waste in an abandoned canal in Niagara Falls that was later used for, there was basically housing built around the edge of that canal. And that's what caused the Love Canal breakout. And the Balmer Road basically is a separate facility, but it was located.
This is a whole lot. This is completely different.
Yeah, yeah, but there's some connection.
This is completely different. It doesn't have anything to do with chemicals.
Yeah.
And that's where the problem comes in. People conflate the two.
Yeah.
This is a different dumping zone, a dumping for radioactive materials.
Yes.
And it's in Lewiston. And the Balmer Road Elementary Temporary School, it was put there temporarily while another school was being built, but they put it right on top of where radioactive waste from atomic bomb and Cold War era stuff was put. Now, the residents of those places, the people that went to that school, are calling themselves the cancer cluster.
Yeah.
Because guess what's happening?
They've all got
among cancer. All of them, there is a highly increased amount of cancer.
Yeah.
And they're attributing it to that. The real problem here, however, is that the school cannot confirm that these kids went to the school.
Yeah.
They don't keep records of elementary school kids. They do for high school kids, but it's not. They don't have to keep the details of elementary kids.
And it was a temporary school anyway.
Yes, but the fact of the matter, it doesn't matter if they went to school or not. If I think here in Ontario, you got to keep the records of your particular students in elementary schools, but I'm not sure of that. But over there, they only have to keep records of the people who went to high school and where they went to high school.
Yeah.
So all these people who claim to have gone to the school, and now they can't really prove it. But what they can say is we all went there, and there's a huge amount of cancer among us that went there.
Yeah. Now, this is an old story, of course, because the story you gave me was dated in 2020, so prior to the outbreak of COVID. So I went looking to see if there was any update on this.
Yeah, they were just beginning to talk about COVID at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. We know the period February of 2020. So we know that we were talking about it pretty well all the time. And but we were still at the studio at that time, weren't we?
Yeah.
All right.
So yeah, we'll thank Gary for this, but that's an ongoing thing because there's little videos and stuff on YouTube about people who are claiming this. Now, I don't know how they're going to get this resolved because, first of all, if the state or whoever the authority is, whoever is deemed responsible for this, can always say that you cannot prove that you were there.
Yeah.
You cannot prove. So every one of the people is going to have to say that I was there with them, and so on. And by this time, all those kids, they're all dispersed all over the place.
Yeah.
They got a high incidence of cancer and they're dying faster. So how are they gonna prove it? And of course they'll bog it up in the courts.
Yeah.
And the school, the spokesman from the school, it's kind of apologizing, saying, I can't help you here because we don't have any records of elementary school kids. We're not required to keep them.
Yeah. And again, that's a very, and I'm sure the district superintendent isn't blocking anything. He's not getting in the way of anything. He's just in an unfortunate position. But again, I'm going to ask you this. You went to school around about this time this was on. How many of your elementary school kids do you remember?
I remember, if you asked me this question 30 years ago, I'd remember a lot more.
Yeah.
Because they haven't come up in my mind. So I can, if I get a school picture out, I can tell you.
Yeah. I can remember
tell you who they are.
I can remember two. One was in the year younger than mine, and one was in my year. The other, again, that wouldn't have changed even 30 years, winding the clock back 30 years. I can remember two junior school kids. That's it, right? I don't remember. I didn't form great friendships back in those days.
Well, I had a lot of really good friends. We were the baby boomers, so my elementary school had 1,000 kids. We were from kindergarten to grade 8, basically. Our school had 2 additions onto it, and it was still too small.
Yeah.
And we had to bring in portables. I spent a great deal of my school in portables, old portables. Some of them were old Army portables. Man, they were old. They had old oil burners in the back to make you warm. They had cloakrooms in them. Like, that's how old-fashioned they were.
Yeah.
And we worked in that. A little later on, we got more modern ones. I remember how modern they were because the ceilings were not as high. They were only about 8 feet high, and they had they were a lot brighter lights. They had fluorescent lights in them, so they were like a lot brighter inside instead of having these really old-fashioned orbs hanging from the ceiling. So
yeah.
But this was a temporary school, and that was very typical of the time. If you have the baby boomers on either side of the river. So they built a temporary school while they were building the more permanent school. But unfortunately, the claim here is that the Bomber Road School, temporary school, was right on top of radioactive elements that caused a higher incidence of cancer among those people. The cancer cluster, they call themselves.
Yeah. But, but of course, it isn't connected at all to the Love Canal in and of itself, because it's a whole different problem. Because again, one of the things about radioactive material is that radioactive material decays over time. So even if you were to find that radioactive material today, it's probably a whole heap less than it was back in the 60s, right?
No, the kind of radioactivity you're talking about has a half-life of 5,000 years. So anybody who would try to put anything there at this particular time would still be
we could sweep it
very much at risk.
Yeah.
If your half-life is 5,000 years, that stuff is just as deadly now as it was when they put it there.
Okay. 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 I accept that. But again, would you be able to find it? Would you be able to find the material?
Sure. Everybody knows where the Bomber Street School was, right?
Oh,
And,
I'm sure.
and
The mere fact that
everybody knows that there was nuclear waste dumping there.
Yeah.
So pretty obvious they haven't built up anything around that area. The problem is they put a temporary school there, and I suppose it was a convenient location for that, probably because it was land easily accessible and not interfering with any neighborhoods, but it was still within range of people getting there.
Yeah. And it was probably only intended for a few years in order to get the permanent school set up.
That's exactly right. That's exactly what they pointed out in the article. Yeah. So that it was a temporary school. Now, those people who did attend that temporary school are the ones that are suggesting that and trying to get some kind of compensation or some kind of recognition. And as the article points out, there's no way of proving that these people went there. They all have to get together and say, yeah, I went with so-and-so and I went with so-and-so, and my other parents are probably either dead or very old. So how do you do that? Well, the main thing here, I think, is very, very important that nobody that this is recognized, that the place is recognized as a bad place to hang around in. And if it isn't cordoned off now, it should be.
Yeah. Yeah, and we got quite a few comments about this, so let me bring up some of the comments. This is like 50 years ago, I think. Yes, and as David said, that was still important. 21 tons is that animate has 200,000 tons of chemical waste. Yeah, but 21 tons of radiation waste is problematic. The chemical waste is, it's still problematic, but dissipates over time, I'm guessing.
Well, to comment on that, the United States and Canada, because of the proximity of electricity, cheap electricity at the time, particularly 25 cycle electricity, allowed a lot of chemical plants to be made here because they need electric furnaces. And the United States and Canada were dumping all kinds of chemicals.
Yeah.
Right. So our side of the river is just as bad as their side proportionately. We weren't any better at it than they were. We just had less of it because there was smaller factories than there were over there.
Yeah.
So we have the same issues.
Yeah. And Mike says during the war, steel companies rolled uranium, and the Manhattan Project left radioactive material everywhere. Okay, so this is one of those areas. Just yesterday, the government moved one family from the homes. The government is only paying for one night stay at Airbnb. This is real time right now, is what Gary.
Where is this? Which government? Is it the U.S. government at the place where the radioactivity was?
Fair question. Yeah. Look at.
This is we're using the information that iWilkins News gave us yesterday, and it's about the Bomber Street Road or Bomber Road temporary elementary school.
Yeah,
and so we don't, and of course we're bringing all kinds of other things in here. We're bringing up stuff about the chemicals, which is notable, but in this particular case, the reason why the people are getting sick in this particular case, they're not the same as the Love Canal people or the people in and around here in Cyanamint that got sick because of chemicals. In this particular case, they got sick because of radiation.
Yeah, yeah.
They were dumping, somebody was irresponsibly dumping something that would harm people in the same manner of irresponsibility, and then putting a school on it, or in Love Canal's part of houses and stuff. The problem here is it's still irresponsibility, but it's different stuff. This is radioactivity they're talking about.
Yeah, and clearly, like we had the Norton plant, which had some part of the Manhattan Project. They had another part that was dealing with that in the 40s in Niagara Falls, New York.
Yeah, they were devising means by producing boron Boron is very important because you have to encapsulate the atomic bomb with boron, because if you have the way in which a fission bomb works is once the nucleus starts to split, so you've got free roaming nucleuses or neutrons floating around, and that's what causes the radioactivity, that energy. But if you've got concentrated amounts of uranium or plutonium, the kind of thing they're talking about in Iran right now, if those are concentrated enough and refined to about 90%, then a free roaming neutron could cause a unexpected reaction. That's where you have the boron. The boron goes around the nuclear bomb to absorb those free neutrons until you get to the point where you're going to drop the bomb. Then you take the boron shell off. Up until then, the boron shell protects you from accidental discharge of the weapon.
Yeah. So, yeah, okay. So that's part and parcel of the explosive element of it, because once you drop it ready to drop the bomb, that's when the boron actually has to get encapsulated, right?
Yeah, it's very, very little known in this area about the Manhattan Project and what we did here. Also, very little known is really a little bit more known as Chalk River and so on. But
very little would be known across the whole of North America, or any plant that was involved in the Manhattan Project wouldn't exactly have been boasting it at that time. Right, same players in Niagara Falls, New York, as there were here in Niagara Falls, Canada. Same companies, the Core Bundum, the Norton cyanamide lignite, and the mother plant of cyanamide is in New Jersey, where they have the Superfund.
Well, remember, our plants were galvanized for weaponry long before the U.S. was. The U.S. was 2 1/4 years out of that war. Canada was fighting it alone and making its own munitions, buying them from the U.S. when it came to the Lend-Lease program a little bit later. But one thing, when the United States did get into the war, they were able to make weapons and tanks and ships and everything at an incredible rate, an amazing rate.
Even before the US got into the war, they were selling Canada and UK.
Yeah, it was a Lend-Lease program.
Yeah, on the Lend-Lease program, yes.
Kind of like what they're doing in Ukraine right now.
Yeah.
They're doing a kind of a Lend-Lease. Here, we'll give you all these weapons. You pay us back later.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so anything else in relation to that issue?
I would just like to say that, well, thanks, iWilkers News, for that one. That is something I didn't really think about at all. I've never heard about that, actually, the Bomber Road thing. I don't know if it's going to conclude very well on the behalf of those people who are suffering, because the preponderance of the evidence is going to be too hard for them unless they hire some really big lawyers and research experts in a kind of a combination claim, I suppose. And at this point, when a lot of the people have already died or suffered from cancer and died, I think it's going to be pretty hard to put this right.
Yeah.
But I think it should get out there as best possible, because they could do this again. You know how they are. You know, some company's going to dump some junk in your backyard and say it's perfectly all right. And 30 years later, the whole neighborhood's suffering. How are you going to trace it back? Hey, that guy 30 years ago told us, and who was that guy's name? I don't know. He came from X and X company, you know?
Yep. Absolutely. You know, and that's part of the problem that local groups live with on a regular basis, right?
You know, right now I got weapons of mass destruction in my backyard from a skunk.
Oh, you got your
second rip. They woke me up at about 5:30 in the morning with a big stink, and of course I had all the windows open because it's a cool night.
Put the
And
drums
now it looks
away.
like round 2 going on about there.
Put the drums away, Dave. You're not supposed to be playing drums at 5 o'clock in the morning.
Well, I might get I don't know. I might get a squirt gun.
So you have to have anti skunk spray, eh? Yeah. Okay. I wish you well with that one. Okay. Moving on. Philanthropist behind the Canadian Human Rights Museum says the family is pausing funding because of the Palestinian exhibit.
Unfortunately, yeah. And now I don't know what to make of this. There was a philanthropic family, a Jewish family in Winnipeg.
Gail Asper is the person. Gail Asper Foundation. Yeah.
Yes. So her and her family have provided money for the human rights thing, and of course, a big part of the human rights museum was, of course, the Holocaust. However, what's happened now is the museum has decided that it should talk about the Palestinian side of the story, which has been a big complaint for many, many years when it comes to the creation of Israel.
Yeah.
And so they did. They put on an exhibition about Palestinians and the Nakba. Almost nobody knows what the Nakba is. Everybody knows what the Exodus is. Everybody knows all this stuff. What happened in the Nakba is 750,000 Palestinians who have been living in the same place pretty much for thousands of years, a couple thousand years, farmers, pretty simple folk. They weren't that sophisticated, just simple folk, were run off their land because the United Nations decided they're going to split Palestine up into two. Jews got one half, Arabs got the other. The Arabs didn't like that because they lived on the other half of the land. So they were pushed out of their land. They were forced out. Some of them were murdered. Some of them were beaten. Most of them were just scared that they had to leave. And what they did is they brought their house keys and their deeds and everything else with them so that they could prove that it was their home a little later on, hoping that they would be, once all the mess was, they could reclaim their rights and live, I don't know, whatever country they want to live, but they go back to where their homes were.
Yeah. Yeah.
That didn't happen, of course. And then after a while, the Palestinians didn't go for it. Obviously, they didn't go for it because that meant half of them would be pushed off their land and pushed into half the space they used to live in.
Yeah.
And in this particular case, for about 500,000 Zionist Jews who had moved there, got one half of the land, and the Arabs, which were twice as many, got one half of the land. They got actually a little less than one half of the land. So, of course, they're not too happy about the whole situation. The UN, I don't know, that everyone's very upset by what the Europeans had done to the Jews during the Holocaust. And of course, they're looking for a solution. So they say, hey, Palestinian people, we need a homeland for Jews. We're gonna put them right where you are. We Europeans are not going to take any responsibility. We Europeans are not going to make a homeland for Jews. No, we're not. We're going to make you give them a homeland. We're going to make you go off your land and get out of there so that we can make a homeland for the Jews who we persecuted. We're the ones that put them in the ovens, but you got to pay for it. That's how the Palestinians see the whole thing. You know, the European guilt figures, okay, we got to have a Jewish homeland, and guess what? We'll go to the biblical homeland and we'll put them there. At that particular time in 1897, when Zionism began in Palestine, only 5% of all of what is now Israel and Palestine, only 5% of that population was Jewish. The rest was the biggest population were Arab Muslims. Arab only because they spoke Arab. They weren't Arab by DNA.
Yeah.
And the Palestinians, Christian Palestinians, which made up about 20% of the population.
Well, the other thing, of course, is that to understand, you used the term Nakba there several times, and the term Nakba basically it was adopted because it's the Arabic word for catastrophe.
Well, that's what the Arabs call it. That's what the Palestinians call it.
Yeah,
the day they were forced off their land.
yeah, that being the catastrophe that occurred to them. And the Declaration of Independence in 1948 led to the displacement of approximately 750,000 Palestinians, and that displacement has been ongoing ever since, of course. And
yeah, that's why 70% of the population of Gaza, why it is so exploded, Gaza, is Palestinians. Yeah. 70% of the Gaza. Before that, it was just people who lived in Gaza.
Okay, so how does
the West Bank is now being attacked by Jewish settlers? That should all be Palestinian land, and the UN recognizes it. Even the United States recognizes it, but they let Israel do what they damn well please. And but this particular philanthropist is worried about if people see this, they will become anti-Semitic. She says that it doesn't fully, they're going to withhold any funds that you normally give to the Human Rights Museum, and say it doesn't fully tell the story. She says it doesn't fully tell the story because once the creation of Israel happened, 800,000 or 850,000 Jews were pushed off of their land, and most of them went anywhere, but a lot of them went to Israel. Because now in Morocco that didn't happen, but in other Arab states, people there became angry at Jews. What happened, let's say, in a country like Iraq, for instance, where there was lots and lots of Jews in Iraq? The Palestinians that got thrown out of their land come into Iraq, the refugees, and they get mad. They get mad at the Jews that are living there. And then the Jews that are living there now feel that they have to flee. And it's it was like, so she says that should be part of the exhibit. Now the exhibit, the museum people said, well, yes, it is. It's just not at this place when they're Nakba is, and other places in the museum, they discuss that. They discuss that completely. Yeah. But the museum, the philanthropist says, no, they got to be right on the same page.
Well, they are different stories in a way, but they are interconnected. I get why they are interconnected, but of course they are, similar stories.
Yes. The thing is, throughout our whole lives and throughout, Israelis could do no harm. Muslims were always bad. The Christian Palestinians were always bad. Palestinians were the bad. You didn't even hear about Christian Palestinians at all. There were all those Palestinians under Yasser Arafat. They're communists. They're Muslim insurgents. Blah 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 blah. And you don't hear about Jewish terrorism either. Ever before the creation of Israel, they had terrorist groups that act just like Hamas does. They were creating their state through terrorism in the same way that Hamas has tried to create a state through terrorism. And the Irgun, the Stern Gang, the Haganah, all these outfits were doing the same thing, using terrorism, murdering people, for trying to create their own state. And we never hear that. And if this lady should have that put, like, she wants the plight of 850,000 Jews put in the same room as the Nakba. It is in another room, but she wants to but they should also put in, if you're going to compare, she mentions Hamas. Well, if you're going to put Hamas there, they should put the Irgun, the Haganah, and the Stern Gang in there, who were Jewish terrorist groups that acted the same as nowadays Hamas and Hezbollah does.
Yeah. The other thing, of course, is that the Protectorate of Palestine came into existence after the end of the First World War, and was patrolled primarily by the British, policed by the British would be more correct. But that was a changing state anyway, because right from the outset there was Jewish settlers going there.
Well, the Balfour Declaration was a kind of mistake. They kind of said, okay, we'll get this Balfour Declaration. The Balfour Declaration came up, which said they're going to make a place for Jews to go. But that had a lot to do with big time Jewish money, European Jewish money, like the Rothschild. The Rothschilds were the ones that were banking Zionism anyway, according to what I've been reading. And the Balfour Declaration was just a ways and means to get some cash, get some cold hard cash out of the Rothschilds, basically, who were the same family that pretty much saved Britain during the Napoleonic Wars, as we know, as I pointed out here. The three most important saviors of Britain during the Napoleonic Wars was Nelson in the Navy, Duke of Wellington in the Army, and the money guy, the guy that kept everything going for them, was
Baron Rothschild.
Yeah, and like without him, we'd be speaking French.
German.
No, French, because it was during the Napoleonic War.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Sorry. That far back. Yeah.
So I'm just saying that family was very prominent.
Yeah.
That family was very, very prominent. And when you went to look for funding for your wars, you went to the Rothschilds. The Confederate Army in the 1860s, if they were looking to fund their war, they went to the Rothschilds, and the Rothschilds turned them down. Not because of anything to do with human rights or slavery or anything. It's because they didn't think that they could pay back their debt.
Yeah,
it's just like banks today. It has nothing to do with the individuals. It has something to do more with business, right? We've got here Rothschild individual members of the Edmund de Rothschild Foundation family heavily financed the early physical and economic foundations. Yes, they did. Yeah, they did. And that was a big problem because Palestinians didn't have and somebody like that on their side.
Yeah.
Anyway, so this lady, she's very, very, very worried about rising anti-Semitism, and she figures that you should see about the Nakba, but and the exhibit of the Nakba has people's houses, house keys, and deeds, and things of that kind. They weren't allowed to take anything. They had to leave their cars, for crying out loud. Like everything was taken from them. They could only take their clothes or whatever they could carry. And when they got the boot. So that story is almost never told. Mm-hmm. I didn't even hear about the Nakba until I was about 30 years old or late 20s. I didn't even heard about it. Mm-hmm. I didn't even heard about the plight of the Palestinians until I worked with Palestinians. And when they told me, I thought they were lying because that's not what I heard out of the news. That's what I never heard anything like this before. They're telling me lies until you look it up, and they're telling me the truth.
Yeah. And the first time I really encountered it was when they were talking, I guess in the 70s, about Yasser Arafat and the PLO.
Yeah, and they made Arafat look really much worse than he was. Any interview you see with Arafat,
they were trying to make him
one-to-one. He's a pretty reasonable dude, but back in those days, they would get his worst side always. And anytime he was very excited or whatever, they made him look like a raving lunatic.
Yeah. In fact, actually, one of the things is that I saw an interview. It was a rare interview with Yasser Arafat. That, my God, that guy was very intelligent and knew a heck of a lot.
Yeah, he was
I learned a lot from him,
yeah.
from that interview, and it was spoken in English. When you think about it, he's an Arabic speaker.
Yeah, he didn't do too bad with the English language. I mean, it wasn't his best, his first language, obviously, but anyway, Israel was always trying to kill him. He may have been poisoned in the long run. That may have happened, but in any case, the Palestinian story never gets told well. And as soon as it is, in this particular case, when they have a Nakba exhibit, there's all kinds of resistance to it. Hey, wait a minute, you're not supposed to tell anybody about that.
Yeah.
Right. And if you do, you got to say all this too. Right. Okay, you can tell about the Nakba, but you got to tell about all the other Jews from all the other Arab countries and all that. When that is already in the museum in a different place. So I don't get it. But
right.
I don't know. I don't really see a whole lot of rising anti-Semitism. I see a lot of awareness of what Israel really is when it comes to apartheid regime. But I really don't see a whole lot of rising anti-Semitism. Now, better check that, because
well, Mike is saying there's
just because I don't know anyone like that doesn't mean it's not happening.
Mike is basically saying there's a spy scandal involving a Canadian Chinese person, and that they're suspected to have done something, held a spy in the United Nations.
Well, that's very possible. We do know that our industries and our government are full of Chinese spies.
So she was working as an intern at NATO's supreme headquarters in Allied powers in Europe, SHAPE, and located in Belgium.
Mons, Belgium, yeah. Well, I haven't come across that story, but what I have come across is what we do is find is, like, in universities or in industry, we find that people of Chinese background will be working there. They steal what they can and then run off to China.
Mm-hmm.
So we do know that there is Chinese espionage in our industry. We know that because the fighter jets and the weapons in which the Chinese have come up with were remarkably like the ones that the Americans were working on, because the Americans didn't guard their secrets well enough, and the Chinese workers there, of course, being paid off or whatever, got that. So we have, but that's nothing new. I think every power, I think the United States has got spies in Britain and Germany. As a matter of fact, when that whole business about the NSA started coming up, what did we find out? We found out that the United States spied on every one of its allies. We found that Israel spies on the United States and its allies all the time. The Israel is always being caught with their finger in the cookie jar. But of course, they just get a slap, all right? And that Germany was spying on the U.S. and Britain was spying on it. So everybody's got their spy network,
Yeah, exactly. All right. Okay, so moving on, of course, we're talking about spies, etc., and the military headquarters. The Pentagon is calling for cheaper long-range weapons, and they're looking at testing some in the next few months.
Yes, it's a very, very rapid industrialization program to get the United States up to snuff on much cheaper weapons. What have we discovered in the Iran-U.S. war? That Iran's small, inexpensive munitions have held the United States off. They have stopped the United States from opening the Strait of Abuse. They have stopped the United States from regime change. They have stopped the United States from actual victory. And how is the Iranians fighting back? The majority of what they do is fight with very low grade weapon, not low grade, but very inexpensive weaponry like drones and cheap missiles and stuff like that. And they put the United States back on their heels. They just killed a couple more. I mean, I think it was there's 19 U.S. service people have dead now. The U.S. Military has been exposed as they're wounded. They say there was about 100 wounded. There's 480 wounded. There might be even more than that. So the U.S. is being fast and loose with who's being wounded, how much damage these things are doing. The U.S., of course, it's a war, and the first victim of every war is the truth. So they're not telling you how many American assets are being destroyed, military bases, airplanes, whatever else is happening. And that's largely being done by very inexpensive weaponry. The United States wants in on this now. As we reported here on this show, the UAE, the other Arab states were using the inexpensive weaponry that the Ukraine has developed. The Ukraine has developed because the Russians were using Iranian drones on them, so they devised their own drones and they come up with some pretty good drone technology. The Ukrainians offered it to Trump. He turned it down, but the U.S. military in the bases around did a nudge, wink, wink with the Arab countries they were based at and say, you get this stuff. It helps us and you can help protect us. And we don't have to talk to the orange balloon about this at all. But now the orange balloon says, well, I don't need any help. I don't need any help with these drones. But obviously that's not the case because that's what they're doing now. They're developing their own inexpensive ordnance because they're running out of, or even if they're not running out so much as they're expending massive amounts of money on this little war. It is exploding the U.S. debt. And so they got to find a way of fighting a war with less expensive ordnance. And if look at Iran has had so much success with less expensive ordnance. Ukraine has, because they learned from the Iranians via the Russians, right? So the U.S. has decided, well, we're going to learn from them too.
Well, and in respects of drone technology, it's been widely recognized that at the moment the experts in the world are actually not the US, but in fact Ukraine
and Iran. And Russia's not bad either. But everybody's taking note. As we've said before, what was the big deal when the war began? The US was running out of what? Artillery shells. Because artillery shells at that particular time were the device by which killed most of the soldiers. Artillery killed 99% of the soldiers. Hand-to-hand fighting weapons of other kinds, only about 2%. The soldiers are required to hold on to the property after the artillery has chased everybody out. But not now. Artillery is still a big deal. What the Ukrainians have found out, and they can thank the Iranians in a roundabout way, because the Soviets started introducing drones that they got, cheap drones that they got from Iranians, and they happened to be very effective, and the Ukrainians responded. And so the United States is going to have to learn a lesson from the Iranians and from the Ukrainians and from the Russians and find out how to make less expensive ordnance.
And Ricky's taking the lesson from Donald J. Trump. Get involved, buy military stocks. Yeah, there you go.
Yes, if you have the means to buy it now, because they're going to be building these things for a very long time. The U.S. stockpiles have been depleted incredibly, that they're going to have to be putting on overtime shifts like crazy. They already got nearly 1 million people working on munitions for the United States. They're way behind. They're behind during Biden's time. The amount of weapons that Biden had supplied to Israel and to Ukraine depleted their resources. And then Trump gets in, and he still continues to deplete the resources with this war in Iran. So, yeah, it would be a good idea to invest in munitions companies in the United States. They're going to be working, 24/7 for a very long time.
Yeah. Well, even if there's not a war,
you can believe that that the Republicans or anyone else, the Democrats too, anyone in Congress is going to make large, because they're going to be able to buy the right kind of stock at the right time.
And that has been, of course, the earmark of Donald Trump's presidency, hasn't it?
Anybody's presidency.
Well, I was particularly Trump's. All right. So moving on, North Niagara, particularly St. Catharines, have basically been suffering basement and crops submerged in flash floods yesterday. So I got everybody's asking me in St. Catharines yesterday, were you flooded out? Were you flooded out? In fact, before I left for work yesterday, my neighbor was actually asking about whether our basement was fine. No, well, yes, it was, because if it had flooded, we'd have had no air conditioning yesterday, of course. And, no, we had no flood.
Well, there you have it. There you have it. Yeah.
So I went down there last night and did double check. So, hey, everything was fine for us. But again, we're further up the hill. Not that it doesn't stop people getting, getting flooded out, but being up the hill is a safety defense, I guess, in a way. Whereas a lot of people in St. Catharines, there's a lot of flooding in St. Catharines.
Yes, at Niagara on the Lake, any low lying areas. It's not often you get flooding because of rainstorms around here.
Yeah.
You might get flooding, people close to the floodplains where the rivers blow over their ordinary pathways, but you don't normally get floods because of intense rainfall. That's pretty rare here.
Yeah.
And
I do remember driving somewhere, and I looked down, and now I can't remember whether it was in St. Catharines or in Niagara. I actually was driving past a road, and I glanced down. One of the. Well, I do know that the hydro plant, the new hydro plant, some of the ponds that they put in, one of them was quite flooded out yesterday morning. But I didn't take particular attention to that, because that pond had been put there for flooding anyway, from part of the process of the hydro manufacture. I think that causes, when certain things occur in that process, it causes floods.
So this flood. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so it causes kickback of water out of the system, which of course has to get dumped somewhere, doesn't it?
Yeah, a lot of them was overtaxed rain sewers, all kinds of things. But anyway, there's going to be insurance companies are going to have to come up with some heavy duty payments.
So Rick says there was a water main break in Niagara Falls. Did you know about that one?
No, but what happens in the summertime when water main breaks is different from the winter. In the winter, the water main breaks because the ground heaves up and it breaks the pipe.
Yeah.
Right. In the summer, it's the opposite. When the ground dries out, in certain areas where the ground dries out, then the ground shrinks and the pipes sag and break.
Yeah.
So there's two types of water main break, and it's usually because the ground gets too dry, it shrinks, and then the pipe sags in certain spots, puts too much pressure, and it breaks. And of course, the other one was the winter, where the ground heaves and breaks the pipe.
Yeah. So one's forcing up
I'm
the
just
others.
guessing. I'm
Yeah.
just guessing that was the reason for that, or it's just getting old. We got a lot of old stuff here.
We do get a lot of old stuff here, and McLeod Road is one of the areas whereby we've had a lot of flooding over time, but we've also had some floods. We've also had some floods on Dorchester. We've had some floods on Valley Way of late. You know?
Well, Valley Way is Old Muddy Run.
Yes, of
Right.
course.
It's going to attract. There's underwater all the time there, and the houses in Muddy Run, they fill up with water in their basement. They have for years, and that's because there was a little river that ran through there. Same thing in Rolling Acres. They got a problem there. They get groundwater problems in certain parts of Rolling Acres because they're on top of an old underwater stream.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. No, they're all problematic. Okay. All right, let's cover this particular one. I don't know why you put it up here, but about this particular ship, the Draken Harold Harpagra. You were talking about this is a 2016 visit to the Great Lakes, and you were looking at it because of the film Odyssey that you saw recently.
Yeah, in my professional review of the film, I had noted that quite obviously there is a ship that's out of place. They've taken an 800 AD ship and put it back 1,000 years to 1200 BC, right? So, and they used this, and I think it was a good idea to actually use it, although it was out of place, it was wrong. But the idea that the men had to row it, and it was a real ship, a real wooden ship, really worked well for the film, because any of the film that was happening on the ship when the guys were rowing it felt real to me, right? It felt real. It felt like that was really interesting parts of it. The only thing that was dumb about it is they were wearing their helmet and armor when they're in open sea, which they wouldn't have done because that would have impeded them on their rowing and all that other stuff. They would have they only put on, let's put it this way, the armor and the helmets, you don't walk around with them on. Every time in that film, they went anywhere, they had helmets and armor on most of the time. It wasn't until later in the film when they've kind of figured out we don't need to wear the armor and the helmet all the time. Now, that ship that they used for the Odyssey was a Viking ship that was made many years ago, and that particular Viking ship,
a replica, of course,
to have visited Ontario back in 2016. I didn't see it, sadly, but
so this was clearly a full size, or as close to full size replica, because it's a 115-foot Viking longship built in Norway, and I guess the whole idea about a replica ship like that is to show people what the Viking era was about, what real life was like at that time.
You really got to wonder. They got a bunch of mad Vikings in the North Sea in a ship like that, rowing all the way to France or Spain to raid and take and steal stuff. You got to think to yourself, those guys were insane. And they must.
Okay, so you know what I used to think. I found out that the Normans, who, aka the Norman Conquest, that they were in fact Vikings, who'd captured parts of France, and that kind of made me feel that they were nuts. So a lot of these Vikings were nuts, right? That's for sure. And it doesn't surprise me that they discovered North America, because they probably rode the entire world before anybody else knew what an oar was.
Well, years ago, the Vikings kept attacking France all the time.
Yeah.
So the French king made a deal with them. Look, you take this hunk of land, that'll be yours, right? And of course, they called it Normandy
Yeah.
for Norsemen,
Yeah.
right? That
Yeah.
was the basis of it, Normandy. So all these wild Vikings all sort of settled there, and they had different dialects. So they adopted the French language in short order. So they lost their language pretty quick. They started speaking French, and they traded their ships in for horses. They suddenly became the best military in Europe. The
Yeah.
Normans.
Yeah.
They were used
Well, and
all over Europe as mercenaries, but they also
yeah.
happened to, of course, and then they went off to conquer England.
Well, and
Well,
actually,
which
let's actually talk about the conquering of England, by the way, because that's another story. The typical story that we heard when I was a kid is there was no connection, of course, between the Harold, who was the rightful king of England, which was what we heard at school, was suddenly attacked by these, by these Norsemen. And there was no indication that there was anything to do with. So he just fought off a whole bunch of Vikings up north, and then he come running back down south to the south coast to fight off the to fight off the Norsemen and Normans there. And there was no indication in the history we learned at school that those were even connected, that these were Norsemen from France, right? So, and worse, even worse, the person, Harold should never have been king of England because that kingdom was already granted to William by the Pride.
yeah, so that was his claim.
Yeah.
It was his claim. He said that Edward the Confessor, the previous king of England before Harold, gave the kingdom to him. Yeah. He also, sadly, Harold, when Harold was captured for a time by William, guaranteed that William could be the king. Anyway. That's why we speak such a funny language. Our language is like 40% Latin and French, but the basic of it is the 25% basics of our language is German. Our grammar is German.
The Saxon origins, which of course predates, of course, the Norman conquest.
Yes, so that's why our language is so funny. There was a guy who said. I just recently I watched this guy. He said, "Why is it that most of our language is French and Latin, and so why do we call ourselves a Germanic language?" And then what he did is he spoke in no words that were other than French or Latin derived, and so he spoke. It kind of made sense, but it was really hard to follow. And then he reiterated the same thing using only old Anglo-Saxon words or Germanic words.
Yeah.
And it made a whole lot of sense because the basis of the language is still the old Germanic language. And then we just added all this other stuff to it.
Yeah, exactly. And remember, of course, there's one thing I did a study about this. I went looking at words, and I found that with the German words, if the word is pronounced the same or spelt the same, then it is likely the same as the word in English. But with French, if the word was pronounced the same or spelt the same, it was most likely not the same meaning in the English language. And I'll take the word travailler in French. Travailler means work, but it looks like travel.
Yeah. Or it could be travail, like our travails, our sufferings, or our our whatever. But that's because it was an English language with all this other stuff overlaid on top. Because for 300 years, the ruling people of Great Britain were French speakers, but it was Anglo-Norman that they were speaking. Yes. Anglo-Norman, which was a specific type of dialect.
But then
that's part of the reason why the French words in our vocabulary could be so much different from those in France.
And then we've added, the British Empire added all of the words from around the world, things like chai, which comes from the Indian, tea, which comes from the Indian chai. And more recently, we've added that as the original Indian word back into the English language, chai. So we've got chai and tea, which all come from India, and
we are
adopted other words from around the world. We're the great adopters when it comes to linguistics.
Yeah, we are the easy ones out there. We'll use anybody's language anytime, steal it, use it. Doesn't matter to us. We are not exactly the purists.
Yeah.
If we see a word in Indian we'll use it.
Yeah.
Exactly. We like one in German, we'll use it.
Yeah.
Dutch, we'll use it.
Absolutely.
Any word at all. Yeah. So
and we've got words. If
you wanted to compare it to a woman, we're the ones of easy virtue.
Because we actually no, I disagree. I disagree. I disagree with you, Dave. We refine the use of language. We've taken other words from other languages. We put them into our own, and we've molded them into something real special. It's all pucker English.
Baloney, man! You'd be a good propaganda. You'd be a great politician, man.
All right,
you'd be a great politician. You belong in the orange balloons propaganda section there.
Okay.
Anyway, so I should wrap it up. I'm going to bring up.
We're done.
We're 8:05 right now.
Yeah.
And Mike's talking about huge amounts of new homes built on watersheds. Yes. Poor planning. Yes. Floodplains. Yes. Yes. Thank you very much for that, Mike. And but we're running to the end here, and I would just like to point out that Gaza is still a nightmare. It has continued to be a nightmare. Right now, the Netanyahu is in the States, and you know what he's going to do. He's going to give little pieces of gold, or he's going to tell Donald Trump how wonderful, great a guy he is, and how a future visionary he was. And next thing you know, Donald Jesus Trump is going to dump all kinds of munitions on his lap, and here, kill some more Palestinians. Just don't tell me about it.
and okay, so we've got to also come back to this one. Of course, we've got to have the Paris World train between here and Toronto.
Yes, yeah, I would think so. Like a big wheel that just rolls all the way to Toronto, right? Yeah. Wouldn't it be cool? And then all the way back.
The trouble is, you want to get off at Grimsby, and you're up here when you pass Grimsby.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we just kind of roll along, and I think that was pretty good. We could make a huge paddle wheel kind of thing, go right across the lake.
That's another one.
I don't know about that. You might have to spend some time underwater for a little bit as you come right back to the top.
That's another one. That's a different one entirely. That's a whole different engineering problem. Okay, so Dave, we need to finish.
Yes, we are Canada, and that means we could be advanced technology in Ferris wheels, because that's something we would do, wouldn't it be? Without further ado, I bid you adieu. Have a great day.